Get out of my seat, now. The words cut through the air like a blade, sharp, cold, final. Those were the first sounds Marcus Bennett heard as he stepped into the first-class cabin of Flight 447, Denver to Washington, D.C. Not a question, not a polite request, a command. And behind it, something darker, and something ancient and familiar. The woman sitting in seat 1A didn't look up when she spoke. She didn't need to. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had never been told no, never been asked to explain herself, never had to justify taking what she wanted. Marcus froze in the narrow aisle. His boarding pass was still warm in his hand. Seat 1A. His name printed clearly, Marcus J. Bennett. Confirmation number, flight number, gate, everything matched. But none of that seemed to matter. The woman, mid-50s, platinum blonde hair pulled into a tight chignon, dressed in an ivory cashmere sweater and designer sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, finally looked up. Her eyes traveled from his sneakers to his face, slowly, deliberately, like she was cataloging evidence. "You're in the wrong section," she said, her tone sweet now, dripping with false patience. "Economy is that way." She flicked her wrist toward the back of the plane, diamonds glinting under the cabin lights. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He looked at the seat number above her head. 1A. He looked at his boarding pass again. 1A. Around them, the cabin had gone still. A businessman 2 rows back lowered his newspaper. A young mother clutching her toddler's hand glanced over, then quickly looked away. A college student in headphones pulled one earbud out, eyes wide. No one said anything. A flight attendant appeared. Her name tag read Melissa. Early 30s. Blonde ponytail. Nervous smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked at the woman in the seat, then at Marcus, and in that half-second, she made a choice. "Sir," Melissa said, her voice professional but firm. "I think there's been a mix-up. Can I see your boarding pass?" Marcus held it out. Melissa didn't look at it. "Economy boarding is through the main cabin," she continued, gesturing behind him. "If you'll just—" "This is my seat," Marcus said quietly. His voice was calm, steady, but underneath there was steel. The woman in 1A let out a theatrical sigh. "Oh, for God's sake, I've been flying Skypath for 20 years. I know how this works. People like you always try to upgrade yourselves without paying. People like you." The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt it then, the familiar weight pressing down on his chest, the tightness in his throat, the heat crawling up the back of his neck. He'd felt it before, in boardrooms, in restaurants, in elevators, in parking lots, in places where his presence was questioned before his credentials. Behind him, someone pulled out their phone. A teenager 3 rows back, traveling alone, had been scrolling through Instagram moments before. Now her camera was angled toward the front of the cabin. Recording. Her username was at Journeys with Jordan, 16 years old. Headed to tour colleges on the East Coast with her mom, who was sleeping in the row behind her. Jordan whispered into her phone, barely audible. "Y'all, this is insane. They won't even look at his ticket." The view count started climbing. 47 viewers, 89, 132. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Melissa crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time. Please proceed to your assigned seating area, or I'll have to call security." The woman in 1A smirked. She pulled out her phone and opened the Skypath app. "See? Right here. Seat 1A. Assigned to me, paid for, confirmed." She held up the screen like a lawyer presenting evidence in court. Melissa nodded, without checking Marcus's pass again. "I apologize for the inconvenience, ma'am. We'll get this sorted out." Marcus stood there, silent, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a gray crew-neck sweater and dark jeans, clean white sneakers, a leather messenger bag slung across his chest. He looked like 1,000 other travelers, except he didn't. Not to them. To them, he looked out of place, suspicious, undeserving. Jordan's live stream hit 1,200 viewers. Comments started flooding in. "This is racist AF. Why won't they just check his ticket? I can't believe this is happening in 2026. That lady is wild." Marcus still hadn't raised his voice, hadn't argued, hadn't demanded anything. He simply stood there, holding his boarding pass, waiting for someone, anyone, to do the right thing. No one did. The businessman folded his newspaper and looked out the window. The young mother turned her attention to her toddler's sippy cup. The college student put his earbud back in. Silence. It wasn't neutral. Silence never is. The woman in 1A adjusted her sunglasses and leaned back, claiming the armrests like they were hers by birthright. "Honestly," she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "the nerve." Marcus looked at her, then at Melissa, then at the passengers pretending not to watch. He could feel his heartbeat in his ears. Not from fear, not from anger, but from something deeper, older, the accumulated weight of every moment like this one, every assumption, every dismissal, every time his presence had been treated as a problem to be solved instead of a person to be respected. This wasn't new. It was a script written long before he was born, and he'd been cast in a role he never auditioned for. But Marcus Bennett wasn't just anyone, and what happened next would change everything. Melissa stepped closer, lowering her voice but keeping it firm. "Sir, if you don't move, I'll call the captain, and if the captain has to get involved, you will be removed from this flight. Do you understand?" The threat was clear. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment something passed between them. Not anger, not resentment, just a quiet, devastating understanding. She knew. Deep down, she knew this was wrong. But she was going to do it anyway, because it was easier, because the woman in the seat looked like someone who mattered. And Marcus, tall, black, dressed casually, looked like someone who didn't. Jordan's stream hit 3,400 viewers. Her hands were shaking as she held the phone. "This man is literally showing them his boarding pass," she whispered, "and they won't even look at it." Marcus took a slow breath. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. Not a big smile, not a performative one, just a small, knowing curve of his lips. The kind of smile that comes when you're holding all the cards and everyone else is still trying to figure out the game. "Ma'am," he said to Melissa, his voice still, calm. "I'm going to ask you one more time to check the manifest. My name is Marcus Bennett, seat 1A. "I don't need to check anything," Melissa snapped. "This passenger has already shown me her confirmation. You need to—" "Check the manifest," Marcus repeated. "Please." The woman in 1A rolled her eyes. "Oh my God. Just call security already. This is ridiculous." Melissa pulled out her tablet. She tapped the screen a few times, scrolling through the passenger list. Her face changed. The color drained from her cheeks. Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She looked at Marcus, then at the woman in 1A, then back at Marcus. "Sir," her voice wavered. I apologize. There's been a mistake," Marcus offered. Melissa nodded, her hands trembling now. "Yes. A terrible mistake. I'm so sorry. I should have—" "Checked," Marcus finished. "You should have checked." The woman in 1A stiffened. What? What are you talking about? I have my confirmation right here. You have a confirmation for seat 1B, Melissa said quietly. Not 1A. Silence. The woman's face flushed red. That's impossible. I always get 1A. I'm a Diamond Elite member. I've been flying this route for 1B, ma'am, Melissa repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm very sorry for the confusion. The woman stared at her phone, then at Marcus, then at Melissa. This is absurd, she hissed. I want to speak to the captain, right now. Marcus stepped aside, gesturing to seat 1B across the aisle. You're welcome to sit in your actual seat, ma'am. Or if you'd prefer, we can both wait while you speak to the captain. The woman's jaw tightened. She grabbed her purse and moved to 1B, her movement sharp and angry. She didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge what had just happened, just sat down and stared straight ahead, her face a mask of barely contained fury. Marcus placed his bag in the overhead compartment and settled into seat 1A. The cabin was still silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. Jordan's live stream had reached 8,900 viewers. The comments were exploding. Wait, is he someone important? Why do I feel like there's more to this story? This man is too calm. He knows something. Melissa stood frozen in the aisle, her tablet still in her hand. Mr. Bennett, I'm so deeply sorry. There's no excuse for... We'll talk later, Marcus said evenly. Right now, I think you have other passengers to attend to. She nodded quickly and walked away, her face pale. The businessman 2 rows back was watching now. Fully watching. The young mother had stopped pretending to be distracted. The college student had both earbuds out. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. And Marcus Bennett, sitting quietly in seat 1A with his hands folded in his lap, knew exactly what was coming. Because this wasn't just about a seat. It never was. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Calm, professional. The kind of voice that had logged 30,000 flight hours and knew how to keep passengers comfortable even when things went wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Raymond Chen speaking. We're currently experiencing a brief delay due to a seating issue in the cabin. We appreciate your patience and expect to be pushing back from the gate shortly. A seating issue. That's what they were calling it. Marcus stared out the window at the tarmac. Baggage carts rolled past. Ground crew in neon vests signaled to each other with orange wands. A jet across the way was backing out of its gate, nose tilting skyward as it turned. Normal. Everything looked so normal. Behind him, whispers had started, low murmurs that rippled through the cabin like wind through tall grass. Did you see that? I can't believe she just... Who do you think he is? The woman in 1B, her name was Catherine Ashford, though Marcus didn't know that yet, sat rigid in her seat, staring at the seat-back screen in front of her. Her jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful. Every few seconds she glanced at Marcus out of the corner of her eye, then look away quickly, as if his presence burned. Melissa returned, this time with another flight attendant, a man, older, salt and pepper hair, name tag, Robert. His expression was serious, apologetic. Mr. Bennett, Robert said quietly, leaning down. On behalf of SkyPath Airlines, I want to personally apologize for what just happened. There's absolutely no excuse for the way you were treated. Marcus looked at him. Appreciate that. Robert hesitated. If there's anything we can do to make this right, complimentary beverage service, miles credit, anything at all, please let us know. I'll think about it, Marcus said. Robert nodded and stepped back. But before he left, he glanced at Melissa. The look he gave her was brief but unmistakable. They would be talking later. And it wouldn't be pleasant. Melissa's hands were still shaking. Jordan's live stream had climbed to 14,000 viewers. She turned the camera toward herself now, whispering into the phone with wide eyes. Okay, so update. They finally checked his ticket, and guess what? He was in the right seat the whole time. The lady who told him to move was in the wrong seat. And now everyone's acting all weird and quiet, and I swear there's something going on that we don't know yet. The comments kept coming. That lady should be ashamed. Flight attendant needs to be fired. I need to know who this man is. Bet he's about to sue. The plane's engine started up, a low hum that vibrated through the cabin. The seatbelt sign chimed on. Robert's voice came through the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and your tray tables are in the upright position. We'll be departing shortly. Catherine Ashford shifted in her seat. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, then closed it, then opened it again. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was tight, defensive. I didn't mean anything by it. Marcus didn't look at her. Didn't you? It was a simple mistake. Anyone could have checked their seat number before sitting down, Marcus said. Could have looked at my boarding pass when I showed it. Could have treated me like a human being instead of an inconvenience. Catherine's face flushed. I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate being called people like you on a flight I paid for, Marcus said evenly. But here we are. Silence. Catherine turned away, her lips pressed into a thin line. Across the aisle, an elderly man with wire-rimmed glasses leaned toward his wife. She owes him an apology, he muttered. His wife nodded. She won't give one. I know, the man said. That's the problem. The plane began to roll backward, pushed by the tug vehicle. Slowly, steadily. The terminal building slid past the window. Jordan put her phone down for a moment, her heart racing. She'd never had this many viewers before. Never been part of something like this. She felt the weight of it. Thousands of people watching, waiting to see what happened next. She picked the phone back up. We're about to take off. I'll keep you guys updated if anything else happens. The plane turned onto the taxiway. The engines roared louder, building power. Outside, the world blurred into motion. Inside, the cabin was still tense, still charged. Marcus closed his eyes and took a slow breath. He thought about his son. 7 years old, learning to read, obsessed with dinosaurs, a kid who still believed the world was fair, that hard work mattered, that people were kind. How much longer would that last? How many more years before someone looked at him the way Catherine Ashford had looked at Marcus? Before someone told him he didn't belong somewhere he had every right to be? The plane lifted off, smooth, graceful, climbing into the sky. Marcus opened his eyes and looked out the window. Denver spread out below them, highways threading through neighborhoods, the mountains rising in the distance, the city getting smaller and smaller until it was just a pattern of lights against the earth. Up here, everything looked simple, ordered, beautiful. But down there, in the world they'd just left, things were different, messier, harder. The lines weren't always clear. And people didn't always do the right thing, even when the right thing was staring them in the face. Melissa walked past, her eyes red. She didn't look at Marcus, didn't look at anyone. Robert followed her to the galley, his expression grim. Catherine pulled out her phone and opened her email. Then her text messages, then LinkedIn. She scrolled mindlessly, her thumb moving in quick, agitated swipes. Jordan's mom woke up in the row behind her. Everything okay, sweetie? Jordan glanced back. Yeah, Mom, yeah. Did I miss anything? Jordan looked at her phone. 18,200 viewers, hundreds of comments, notifications exploding across her screen. Not really, she said. The plane leveled off at cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Robert's voice returned to the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, you're now free to move about the cabin. Flight attendants will begin beverage service shortly. Estimated flight time to Washington, D.C. is 4 hours and 12 minutes. 4 hours and 12 minutes. A lot could happen in 4 hours and 12 minutes. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and stood. He pulled his phone from his pocket and checked his messages. 7 new texts, 3 missed calls, all from the same number. His assistant. He opened the first text. Marcus, media team just flagged something. There's a TikTok going viral. Flight 447. Is that you? Marcus's jaw tightened. He opened TikTok and searched Flight 447. The video was already at the top of the trending page. 1.2 million views. Posted 12 minutes ago. The caption read, "Black man humiliated on flight. Then this happened." Marcus watched the video. Watched himself standing in the aisle. Watched Catherine tell him to move. Watched Melissa refuse to check his boarding pass. Watched the whole thing play out from Jordan's perspective, 3 rows back. The comments were a flood. This is disgusting. I hope he sues. That woman should be arrested. Flight attendant should lose her job. Why does this keep happening? Marcus put his phone down. He looked at Catherine, still scrolling on her own phone, oblivious to the storm building around her. He looked at Melissa, standing in the galley with her head in her hands. He looked at the passengers around him, most of whom had gone back to their movies, their books, their laptops, as if nothing had happened, and he made a decision. He stood up and walked toward the galley. Robert saw him coming and straightened. "Mr. Bennett, is everything?" "I need to speak with the captain," Marcus said. Robert blinked. "The captain is currently—" "I know he's flying the plane," Marcus said calmly. "I need to speak with him when it's convenient. It's important." Robert hesitated, then nodded. "I'll let him know." Marcus returned to his seat. Catherine was watching him now. Her expression had changed. Something in her eyes looked almost nervous. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. Not with anger, not with contempt, just clarity. "What I should have done the moment I stepped onto this plane," he said. "Tell the truth." Catherine's face went pale. Jordan's live stream hit 25,000 viewers. And the plane flew on, cutting through the sky, carrying a cabin full of people who had no idea what was about to happen next. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. 20 minutes into the flight, the cockpit door opened. Captain Raymond Chen stepped out, mid-50s, lean build. The kind of presence that commanded respect without saying a word. He'd been flying commercial aircraft for 28 years, seen it all. Handled emergencies, medical crises, unruly passengers, mechanical failures. He thought he'd seen it all. He was wrong. Robert met him near the galley and spoke quietly. Captain Chen's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. He glanced toward seat 1A, then nodded. He walked down the aisle, stopping beside Marcus. "Mr. Bennett," he said, his voice low and professional, "I understand you wanted to speak with me." Marcus looked up. "I do, but not here." Captain Chen nodded. "Follow me." They walked toward the back of first class, near the galley where they could speak without being overheard. Melissa and Robert stepped aside, giving them space. Jordan, still streaming, angled her phone slightly to capture the movement. "Okay, this is getting interesting," she whispered. "The captain just came out to talk to him." Viewer count, 31,000. Captain Chen folded his arms, his expression neutral but attentive. "What can I do for you, Mr. Bennett?" Marcus met his gaze. "I want to know what happens next." "I'm not sure I understand." "What happens to the flight attendant who refused to check my boarding pass?" Marcus asked. "What happens to the woman who told me to get out of a seat I paid for?" What happens to make sure this doesn't happen to the next person who looks like me and tries to sit in first class?" Captain Chen was quiet for a moment. "I've already filed an incident report. Melissa will be meeting with her supervisor when we land. As for the passenger—" "Catherine Ashford," Marcus said. Captain Chen blinked. "You know her name?" "I know a lot of things," Marcus said. "I know she's a marketing executive at Harman & Spire. I know she flies this route twice a month. I know she thinks her status gives her the right to treat people however she wants." Captain Chen's expression shifted slightly. "How do you—" "Because I make it my business to know," Marcus said. "Especially when someone disrespects me on my own airline." The words hung in the air. Your own airline. Captain Chen's face went very still. "I'm sorry. What did you just say?" Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Simple, elegant, embossed lettering. Marcus J. Bennett, Chief Executive Officer, Skypath Airlines. Captain Chen stared at the card, then at Marcus, then back at the card. His face went pale. "You're—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "CEO," Marcus said quietly. "I've been running Skypath for 3 years. Before that, I was VP of Operations. Before that, I was a pilot, just like you." Captain Chen looked like the floor had dropped out from under him. "Sir, I had no idea. I didn't— Oh my God." "No one did," Marcus said. "That's the point." Behind them, Jordan's phone was still recording. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see Captain Chen's face, could see the shock, the disbelief, the dawning horror of realization. "Oh my God," Jordan whispered into the camera. "I think he just told the captain who he is." The comments exploded. "Wait, what? Is he the CEO? No way. This is insane." Captain Chen's hands were shaking now. "Mr. Bennett, Marcus, I am so sorry. If I had known—" "If you had known, you would have treated me differently," Marcus said. "But you shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me with respect. That's the problem." Captain Chen nodded slowly, his throat tight. "You're absolutely right. There's no excuse." "There isn't," Marcus agreed. "Which is why things are going to change. Starting today. What do you need from me?" Marcus looked past him toward the first-class cabin, toward Melissa, who was standing with her back to them, her shoulders tense, toward Catherine, who was still scrolling on, her phone, unaware that her world was about to implode. "I need you to land this plane safely," Marcus said. "After that, I need you to clear the first-class cabin once we're at the gate. No one leaves until I say so." Captain Chen's eyes widened slightly. "Sir, that's highly irregular." "So is refusing to check a black passenger's boarding pass because you assume he's lying," Marcus said. "We're past regular." Captain Chen swallowed hard, then nodded. "Understood." He turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, Marcus, I'm ashamed of what happened, of the fact that you had to go through this on your own airline. It's unacceptable." "I appreciate that, Captain," Marcus said. "But shame doesn't change anything. Action does." Captain Chen nodded again and walked back toward the cockpit, his face drawn. Robert and Melissa had been watching from a distance. As soon as Captain Chen was gone, Robert stepped forward. "Mr. Bennett, I don't even know what to say." "Then don't say anything yet," Marcus said. "Just make sure everyone stays calm for the rest of the flight." "Yes, sir. Absolutely." Melissa was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. She looked at Marcus, her expression devastated. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear I didn't." "Would it have mattered if you did?" Marcus asked. The question cut through her like a blade. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't know," she finally said. "Then that's the first honest thing you've said all day," Marcus replied. He wasn't cruel, wasn't harsh, just truthful. We'll talk when we land." Melissa nodded and walked away, her hands covering her face. Marcus returned to his seat. Catherine was watching him now. Really watching. Her phone was in her lap, forgotten. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus didn't answer. He pulled out his laptop and opened it. Started typing. Catherine leaned toward him. "I asked you a question." "And I'm choosing not to answer," Marcus said without looking up. "Just like you chose not to check your seat number before sitting in mine." Her face flushed red. "This is ridiculous. I'm going to file a complaint the second we land." "You do that," Marcus said. She stared at him, her jaw working. Then she turned away, grabbed her phone, and started typing furiously. Jordan's stream was at 47,000 viewers. The comments were a wildfire. "Someone please tell me who this man is." "Why is the flight attendant crying?" The captain looked shook. "This is the craziest thing I've ever seen on a plane." An hour passed, then another. The cabin settled into a tense quiet. Passengers read, watched movies, slept. But there was an undercurrent of awareness. Everyone knew something had happened. Most didn't know what, but they could feel it. Jordan finally ended her live stream. Her hands were cramping. Her phone battery was at 9%. She'd gained 22,000 followers in the last 2 hours. The video had been viewed 2.3 million times. It was being shared on Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, Facebook. News outlets were starting to pick it up. Headlines were forming. Viral video shows black man humiliated on flight, then shocking twist. CEO allegedly removed from first class on his own airline. SkyPath Airlines faces backlash after discrimination incident goes viral. Catherine's phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then started buzzing continuously. She looked at the screen. Her face went white. Text messages? Dozens of them. From colleagues, from friends, from her boss. "Catherine, what the hell is this? Are you serious right now? You need to call me immediately." She opened Twitter. Her hands were shaking. Her name was trending. #Catherine Ashford. Attached to Jordan's video. Attached to screenshots. Attached to her LinkedIn profile, her company bio, her professional headshot. The comments were vicious. "This woman should be fired." Imagine being this racist in 2026. Her employer needs to see this. She told a black man to get out of his seat on his airline. Catherine's breath came in short, sharp gasps. She scrolled faster. The posts kept coming. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. Her company's official Twitter account had posted a statement 20 minutes ago. Harman Inspire does not condone discrimination of any kind. We are investigating this matter and will take appropriate action. Appropriate action. Catherine felt the walls closing in. She looked at Marcus. He was still typing on his laptop, calm, focused, like nothing had happened. "You did this," she hissed. Marcus glanced at her. "I didn't do anything. You did this. The moment you opened your mouth and told me to get out of your seat. I didn't know who you were." "Exactly," Marcus said. "You didn't know, and you didn't care, because in your mind, someone who looks like me couldn't possibly belong in first class, couldn't possibly deserve the same respect you demand for yourself." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "You're going to ruin my life." "No," Marcus said quietly. "You ruined your own life. I'm just making sure everyone sees it." She turned away, her face crumpling. The plane began its descent. Captain Chen's voice came over the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our initial descent into Washington, D.C. Please return to your seats and fasten your seat belts. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for landing." The landing gear deployed with a heavy thunk. The plane tilted downward, engines shifting pitch. Marcus looked out the window. The capital city spread out below, monuments gleaming white in the late afternoon sun, the Potomac River snaking through the landscape, the grid of streets and buildings stretching toward the horizon. He thought about what was waiting for him when they landed, the media, the questions, the fallout. He thought about his son, about the world he wanted to build for him, a world where a 7-year-old boy wouldn't grow up having to prove he belonged everywhere he went. If you were Marcus, facing a situation like this, with the power to change things, but also the weight of it all on your shoulders, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. The plane touched down, smooth, controlled. The tires squealed against the runway. The engines roared in reverse thrust, slowing them down. They taxied toward the gate. The familiar sounds of seatbelts unbuckling, overhead bins opening, phones powering on filled the cabin. Captain Chen's voice returned. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Washington, D.C. Local time is 6:47 p.m. For your safety, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until the aircraft has come to a complete stop and the seatbelt sign has been turned off." The plane rolled to a stop. The seatbelt sign chimed off. But before anyone could stand, Captain Chen's voice came back on. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special request from our operations team. We ask that all passengers in first class please remain seated for a few moments. This will only take a minute. Thank you for your patience." Confused murmurs rippled through the cabin. Catherine's face went pale. "What's happening?" Marcus closed his laptop and stood. Everyone in first class was looking at him now, and what happened next would be talked about for years to come. Marcus stood in the aisle. Every passenger in first class was looking at him, some confused, some curious, a few nervous. The cabin door was still closed. Outside, through the windows, ground crew moved around the plane. A jetway was extending toward them, but it hadn't connected yet. Robert and Melissa stood near the galley, their faces tense. Captain Chen emerged from the cockpit again, this time followed by his co-pilot, First Officer Lisa Tran. They stood at the front of the cabin, flanking Marcus. The silence was absolute. Marcus took a breath. "I want to thank you all for flying with us today," he began, his voice calm and steady. "I know the last few hours have been unusual, and I owe you an explanation." He paused, looking around the cabin, making eye contact with passengers, with Catherine, with Melissa. "My name is Marcus Bennett," he continued, "and I'm the CEO of Skypath Airlines." The words landed like thunder. Gasps erupted throughout the cabin. Passengers turned to each other, eyes wide. Someone dropped their phone. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God!" Catherine Ashford's face drained of all color. She gripped the armrest so hard her knuckles went white. Jordan, in the back, had turned her phone camera back on. She was shaking. "What happened today," Marcus continued, "is not new. It's not unique. It happens every day, on flights across this country and around the world. People make assumptions based on how someone looks, based on the color of their skin, based on what they're wearing, based on prejudices so deeply ingrained that they don't even recognize them as prejudice." He looked at Melissa. She was crying again, her face buried in her hands. "When I boarded this flight, I was treated like a criminal, like someone trying to steal a seat that didn't belong to me. My boarding pass was ignored. My presence was questioned, and I was threatened with removal, not because I did anything wrong, but because I didn't look like someone who belonged in first class." The cabin was silent except for the sound of Melissa's quiet sobs. "I could have pulled out my business card immediately," Marcus said. "Could have announced who I was. Could have used my position to avoid this entire situation, but I didn't. Because the point isn't about me. It's about every single person who doesn't have a business card to pull out. Every person who gets treated this way and has no recourse, no power, no voice. He turned to Catherine. Ms. Ashford, you told me to get out of your seat. You said that people like me always try to sneak into places we don't belong. You made those statements loudly, publicly, in front of dozens of witnesses. And when I showed you my boarding pass, you didn't care. You'd already decided I was lying. Catherine's mouth opened, but no words came out. Tears were streaming down her face now. You owe me an apology, Marcus said. Not because I'm the CEO, but because I'm a human being who deserved basic respect and dignity. And you denied me both. The silence stretched. Catherine's voice came out as a broken whisper. I'm sorry. I didn't hear you, Marcus said. I'm sorry, she repeated, louder this time. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was horrible. She broke down, unable to continue. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded. Thank you. He turned to Melissa. Ms. Simmons, you were given a simple task. Check a boarding pass. Instead, you made an assumption. You sided with someone because they looked like they belonged and dismissed someone because they didn't. You threatened to call security on a paying customer who had done nothing wrong. Melissa was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. I'm so sorry, Mr. Bennett. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I assumed. Oh, God, I'm so sorry. Assumptions, Marcus said quietly, are how discrimination survives. Because people assume that their gut feelings are facts, that their comfort zones are universal truths, that someone who doesn't fit their mental image must be the problem. He looked around the cabin again. Every single person in this cabin saw what happened, and most of you said nothing, did nothing. You watched a man be humiliated, and you looked away, because it was easier, because it wasn't your problem, because getting involved felt uncomfortable. The passengers shifted in their seats. Some looked ashamed, others defensive. None of them spoke. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty, Marcus said. I'm telling you this because silence is complicity. When you see something wrong and you say nothing, you're not staying neutral. You're choosing a side, and that side is never the victim's. He paused. Today, a 16-year-old girl named Jordan did what most adults in this cabin couldn't do. She recorded what was happening. She shared it. She made sure the truth was documented. And because of her, millions of people now know what happened on Flight 447. Jordan's eyes widened. She hadn't expected to be called out, hadn't expected him to know her name. Marcus looked toward the back of the cabin, right at her. Thank you, Jordan. You did the right thing. Jordan's hands were shaking as she held her phone. Tears welled in her eyes. The comments on her stream were exploding. He just thanked her. This man is a legend. I'm actually crying. This is the most powerful thing I've ever seen. Marcus turned back to the rest of the cabin. What happens next is up to all of us, he said. SkyPath Airlines will be implementing immediate changes. Mandatory bias training for every employee. Body cameras for all flight crew. Independent review boards for discrimination complaints. And a zero-tolerance policy for behavior like what you witnessed today. He looked at Melissa. Ms. Simmons, you will be suspended pending a full investigation. Depending on the findings, you may be terminated. That decision will be made by our HR team, not by me. Melissa nodded, unable to speak. Marcus looked at Robert. Mr. Torres, as lead flight attendant, you allowed this situation to escalate. You also failed to intervene when it was clear that Miss Simmons was not handling the situation appropriately. You'll be subject to the same review process. Robert's face was grim, but he nodded. Understood, sir. Marcus turned to Captain Chen. Captain, You did everything right once you became aware of the situation. But the fact that it took this long for anyone to involve you is a systemic failure. We'll be reviewing our protocols to ensure the flight crew have clearer guidelines on when to escalate passenger conflicts. Captain Chen nodded. Yes, sir. I'll work with the operations team on that immediately. Finally, Marcus looked at Catherine. Ms. Ashford, I have no authority over your employment. That's between you and Harmon and Spire. But I can tell you this. Your behavior today was recorded, shared, and witnessed by millions of people. The consequences of that are yours to face. Catherine was openly weeping now, her face in her hands. Marcus's expression softened slightly. I hope you use this as an opportunity to reflect, to learn, to become better, because the world is watching, and they're not going to forget. He stepped back. That's all I have to say. You're free to deplane now. Thank you for flying Skypath. He walked toward the exit, Robert and Captain Chen stepping aside to let him pass. The cabin was utterly silent. Then slowly, someone started clapping. It was the elderly man with the wire-rimmed glasses, the one who'd whispered to his wife earlier. His wife joined him. Then the college student. Then the young mother. Then more and more. Within seconds, the entire first-class cabin was applauding. Marcus paused at the door, looking back. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just nodded once. Then he stepped off the plane. Jordan's live stream hit 89,000 viewers. The video had been viewed 4.7 million times. It was trending on every platform. News vans were already pulling up to the airport. Inside the cabin, passengers began to gather their things. But the energy had changed. People were talking now. Really talking. Did you see his face when he told her who he was? I can't believe we just witnessed that. That took guts. I should have said something earlier. I should have... Catherine Ashford sat frozen in her seat. Her phone was still buzzing. Notifications, messages, emails. All of it crashing down on her at once. She looked at the empty seat beside her. Seat 1A. The seat she'd claimed like it was her birthright. The seat that had cost her everything. Melissa walked past, escorted by 2 Skypath supervisors who'd boarded the plane. Her face was swollen from crying. Her career, 12 years of service, was over. Maybe not officially yet, but she knew. Everyone knew. Robert followed, his expression stoic. He'd survive this, probably, but his reputation wouldn't, not completely. Jordan packed up her things, her hands still shaking. Her mom was looking at her with a mixture of confusion and concern. Jordan, what happened? Why is everyone talking about you? Jordan showed her the phone. Mom, I think I just became part of something big. The passengers filed off the plane. The jetway was crowded. People were checking their phones, reading the headlines, watching the videos that were already everywhere. By the time they reached the terminal, it was chaos. News crews, reporters, camera flashes, microphones thrust forward. Mr. Bennett, can we get a statement? What are you going to do about the employees involved? Will you be pressing charges against the passenger? Is Skypath Airlines facing a lawsuit? Marcus walked through it all with the same calm he'd shown on the plane. He didn't stop, didn't engage, just kept walking, his security team forming a protective barrier around him. Behind him, Catherine Ashford emerged from the jetway. The camera swung toward her immediately. Ms. Ashford, do you have a response to the video? Are you going to apologize? Have you been fired from Harmon and Spire? She tried to walk faster, but they followed. Questions shouted from every direction, flashes blinding her, the weight of her actions crushing her with every step. This was her life now. This moment, this video, this mistake. It would follow her forever. Jordan walked through the terminal, with her mom trying to process everything. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Interview requests, news outlets, podcast invitations, brand deals. A woman approached her, mid-30s, professional but kind. "Jordan, my name is Amanda. I work for Justice Stories. We're a digital media company that covers stories exactly like this. Would you be interested in talking with us about what you witnessed today?" Jordan looked at her mom. Her mom looked at Amanda, then back at Jordan. "We'll think about it," her mom said carefully. Amanda handed her a business card. "No pressure, but what you did today mattered. You gave a voice to something that needed to be heard. That's powerful." Jordan took the card. As they walked toward baggage claim, her mom put an arm around her shoulders. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. "You saw something wrong, and you didn't look away. That's more than most people can say." Jordan nodded, still processing, still trying to understand the magnitude of what had just happened. She'd gone viral before. Funny videos, dance challenges, lip syncs. But this was different. This mattered. And somewhere deep down, she knew her life had just changed. Marcus Bennett reached his car, a simple black sedan, no flash, no fanfare, and climbed into the back seat. His assistant was waiting, tablet in hand, face serious. Marcus is everywhere. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, all the networks. The hashtag #Flight447 is trending worldwide. The video has been viewed over 6 million times in the last 3 hours. Marcus nodded. "Good." "Good?" His assistant blinked. "Marcus, the board is going to lose their minds. Shareholders are already calling. PR is in full panic mode." "Let them panic," Marcus said calmly. "This needed to happen." "But we've been talking about systemic change for years," Marcus said. "Diversity initiatives, inclusion training, all of it performative. All of it designed to check boxes without actually changing anything. Today, that ends." His assistant stared at him. "You planned this." "I didn't plan to be humiliated on my own airline," Marcus said. "But once it happened, I decided to use it. Because if the CEO of an airline can be treated that way, what chance does anyone else have?" The car pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic. Marcus looked out the window at the city passing by, at the people on the sidewalks, at the lives being lived in parallel to his own. "Schedule an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning," he said, "and get our legal team ready. We're going to have a lot to discuss." His assistant nodded, already typing on the tablet. Marcus leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. The fight was just beginning, but for the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The board meeting began at 8 the next morning. Marcus walked into the conference room on the 42nd floor of SkyPath's headquarters in Chicago. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan, the water stretching endlessly toward the horizon. 12 people sat around the polished oak table. Board members, investors, power players who'd helped build SkyPath into one of the country's top 5 airlines. They did not look happy. Chairman Gerald Westbrook, 73, silver hair, 3-piece suit, sat at the head of the table. His expression was stone. "Marcus," he said, his voice clipped, "please sit." Marcus took his seat at the opposite end of the table. His assistant, David, sat beside him with a laptop and a stack of folders. "I assume you've all seen the video," Marcus said. "We've seen it," Westbrook replied, "along with 600 million other people." 640 million as of this morning, David corrected quietly. Westbrook's jaw tightened. The fallout from this incident has been catastrophic. Our stock dropped 4% in after-hours trading. We've received over 50,000 emails demanding action. Advertisers are threatening to pull their partnerships. And the FAA has opened an inquiry into our employee training protocols. "Good," Marcus said. Silence. Board member Patricia Chen, early 60s, former CFO of a Fortune 500 company, leaned forward. Good? Marcus, do you understand what you've done? You've made SkyPath the face of racial discrimination in America. Every news outlet is running stories about us. We're being compared to incidents from the 1960s. This is a PR nightmare. This isn't about PR, Marcus said calmly. This is about accountability. Accountability? Another board member, Thomas Reed, late 50s, hedge fund manager, scoffed. You humiliated our employees on a global stage. You've turned a simple seating dispute into a national conversation about race. Do you have any idea how much this is going to cost us? Less than it would cost to keep ignoring the problem, Marcus replied. There is no problem, Reed shot back. One employee made a mistake. One passenger behaved inappropriately. That's it. This happens on flights every day. The difference is, you turned it into a circus. Marcus's expression didn't change. Let me be very clear about something. What happened on Flight 447 wasn't a mistake. It was a symptom. A symptom of a culture that assumes black passengers in first class must be in the wrong seat. A culture that sides with white passengers over black ones without checking facts. A culture that has been allowed to persist because people like you would rather ignore it than address it. Reed's face flushed red. That's absurd. We have diversity initiatives. That don't work, Marcus interrupted. We have training programs that employees complete once and forget. We have policies that look good on paper but aren't enforced. We have a company that talks about inclusion but doesn't practice it. And yesterday, that reality was broadcast to the world. Patricia Chen shook her head. So your solution is to destroy our reputation? To tank our stock price? To turn our employees into villains? My solution, Marcus said, standing up, is to fix what's broken, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it costs us money, even if it makes people angry. He pulled out a folder and slid copies across the table to each board member. This is a comprehensive plan for systemic change at SkyPath, he said. Mandatory quarterly bias training for all customer-facing employees. Body cameras for flight attendants. Independent review boards for discrimination complaints. Partnerships with civil rights organizations to audit our practices. And a $40 million annual investment in equity programs. Westbrook flipped through the document, his expression darkening. $40 million. Yes, that's insane. That's necessary, Marcus countered. Because if we don't do this, the next incident won't just go viral. It'll destroy us. Customers will leave. Employees will sue. Regulators will step in. And we'll spend $100 million in legal fees and lost revenue trying to recover. Or, Reed said slowly, we could fire the employees involved, issue an apology, and move on. The news cycle will forget about this in a week. Marcus looked at him. The news cycle might forget, but the people who've experienced this kind of treatment never will. And there are millions of them. Millions of potential customers who are watching right now to see what we do next. If we brush this under the rug, we lose them forever. The room was quiet. Westbrook set the document down. Marcus, I understand your passion. I do. But this company has shareholders. We have obligations. We can't just throw money at a problem because it feels right. This isn't about feelings, Marcus said. This is about survival. Demographics in this country are changing. The customers of tomorrow are not going to tolerate the practices of yesterday. If we don't adapt, we'll be obsolete in 10 years. Patricia Chen sighed. Even if we agree with you, and I'm not saying we do, the optics of this are terrible. You used your position to publicly shame your own employees. That's going to make it very difficult to maintain staff morale. Staff morale, Marcus repeated. You want to talk about morale? Let's talk about the black employees who've been passed over for promotions. The Latino employees who've been asked if they speak English. The Asian employees who've been told they're articulate, like it's a surprise. Let's talk about the morale of the people who've been putting up with this for years, while leadership did nothing. The room fell silent again. David pulled up a presentation on the screen behind Marcus. Charts, graphs, data. These are internal employee surveys from the last 5 years, Marcus said. 43% of our non-white employees reported experiencing discrimination in the workplace. 61% said they didn't feel comfortable reporting it, and 78% said they didn't believe leadership would take their complaints seriously. He let the numbers sink in. That's not a PR problem, he said. That's a company problem. And it's been festering for years because we've been too comfortable to confront it. Westbrook rubbed his temples. What you're proposing is going to be expensive, disruptive, controversial. Yes, Marcus agreed, but the alternative is worse. The alternative is managing this quietly, Reed said, without turning it into a media spectacle. Marcus looked at him. There's nothing quiet about racism, Mr. Reed. It's loud, it's public, it's violent, and the only reason it's remained manageable for so long is because the people experiencing it didn't have the platform to make you listen. Well, now they do. And you can either be on the right side of this, or you can be remembered as the board that chose comfort over conscience. The silence stretched. Finally, Westbrook spoke. I want a full cost analysis of this proposal by end of day, and I want legal to review every aspect of these new policies. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. Marcus nodded. I'll have everything on your desk by 6. The meeting adjourned. Board members filed out, some avoiding eye contact, others giving Marcus small nods of acknowledgement. Patricia Chen lingered. Marcus, can I speak with you for a moment? They waited until the room was empty. You handled that well, she said. Better than I expected. You thought I'd lose my temper. She smiled slightly. I thought you'd tell Thomas Reed what you really think of him. Marcus smiled back. I wanted to. I know, she paused. For what it's worth, I agree with you. We should have addressed this years ago. But change is hard, especially for people who've never had to think about these issues. I know, Marcus said. That's why I'm not asking them to think about it. I'm making it policy, because thinking about it hasn't worked. Patricia nodded. You're going to face a lot of resistance. From the board, from employees, from the public. I've faced resistance my whole life, Marcus said. This is just another day. She looked at him for a long moment, then extended her hand. You have my support. For what it's worth. Marcus shook it. It's worth a lot, thank you. She left. David began packing up the laptops and folders. That went better than I expected. It's not over yet, Marcus said. We still have to actually implement all of this. Do you think they'll approve it? They don't have a choice, Marcus said. The world is watching. If they reject this plan, it'll be the headline tomorrow. And that's a fight they can't win. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant's assistant. CNN wants an interview. So does 60 Minutes. And Oprah's people called. Marcus stared at the message. What do you want me to tell them? David asked, reading over his shoulder. Marcus thought for a moment. Tell them I'll do one interview, just one, and I want it to be with someone who understands what's really at stake here. Who? Justice Stories, Marcus said. The same people who've been covering stories like this for years. They get it. David nodded and started typing. Marcus looked out the window at the city below, at the people moving through their lives, unaware of the fight being waged in corporate boardrooms, unaware that the decisions made in rooms like this one would shape their experiences the next time they traveled. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from his wife. Saw the board meeting coverage. You okay? He typed back quickly. I'm fine. How's Jay? Asking questions. Wants to know why people were mean to you on the plane. Marcus's chest tightened. What did you tell him? The truth. That sometimes people make assumptions based on how someone looks, and that you're working to change that. What did he say? He said you're a superhero, Marcus smiled. Type back. Tell him I love him and that I'm doing this for him. He knows. So do I. Come home when you can. Marcus pocketed his phone. Ready to go? David asked. One more thing, Marcus said. He pulled out his laptop and opened his email. Drafted a message. Company-wide. Every employee. Every department. The subject line read, Moving Forward Together. He wrote, Yesterday something happened on Flight 447 that should never have happened. A passenger was treated with disrespect and bias based on assumptions about who they were and where they belonged. That passenger was me. I share this not to embarrass the employees involved, but to highlight a systemic issue that affects our customers and our staff every day. We can do better. We must do better. Effective immediately, SkyPath Airlines is implementing comprehensive changes to our training, policies, and culture. This will not be easy. It will not be comfortable, but it is necessary. I am committed to building an airline where every passenger, regardless of race, gender, religion, or background, is treated with dignity and respect. Where our employees are equipped to handle difficult situations with fairness and empathy. Where bias is not tolerated and accountability is the standard. This is not just about what happened yesterday. It's about what happens tomorrow and every day after that. I hope you'll join me in this effort. Marcus Bennett, CEO, SkyPath Airlines. He hit send. Within minutes, replies started coming in. Hundreds of them, thousands. Thank you for addressing this. It's about time. I've experienced this firsthand. Glad to see leadership taking it seriously. This is what real leadership looks like. Not all of them were positive. Some employees were angry, defensive, accused him of overreacting, of making the company look bad. But most were supportive, hopeful, ready for change. Marcus closed the laptop and stood. All right, he said to David, let's go. They walked out of the conference room through the executive wing toward the elevators. As they passed cubicles and offices, employees looked up. Some nodded, some whispered, some just stared. Marcus kept walking, head up, shoulders back. He thought about Catherine Ashford, about Melissa Simmons, about Robert Torres, about all the people whose lives had been upended in the last 24 hours. He didn't take pleasure in their suffering, but he didn't regret what he'd done either, because sometimes discomfort is the only path to growth, and growth is the only path to justice. The elevator doors opened. Marcus stepped inside, and the journey continued. 3 weeks later, Melissa Simmons sat in a small conference room at SkyPath's Denver training facility. The walls were beige. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A cup of coffee, now cold, sat untouched in front of her. Across the table sat two people. Dr. Renee Marshall, Director of Equity and Inclusion, and Thomas Hargrove, Senior HR Manager. Dr. Marshall was a black woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and an unflinching presence. She'd spent 20 years studying implicit bias, working with corporations to dismantle systemic discrimination. SkyPath had brought her on 2 weeks ago. Marcus Bennett's first major hire after Flight 447. Ms. Simmons, Dr. Marshall began, her voice gentle but firm. Thank you for coming today. Melissa nodded. She'd lost weight. Dark circles under her eyes. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Because she hadn't. I know the last 3 weeks have been difficult, Dr. Marshall continued. But before we discuss your employment status, I want to understand what happened from your perspective. Not from the video, not from the reports, from you." Melissa's hands trembled as she folded them on the table. I don't even know where to start." "Start with what you were thinking when Mr. Bennett approached his seat." Melissa closed her eyes, took a breath, opened them again. "I saw him walking down the aisle," she said quietly. "And my first thought was, he's in the wrong section. I didn't even think about it. It was just automatic, like a reflex." "What made you think that?" Melissa's voice cracked. "Because he was black, and wearing a hoodie, and carrying a backpack. And in my mind, that didn't match what first-class passengers look like." Dr. Marshall nodded. "And when he showed you his boarding pass?" "I didn't look at it." Tears welled in Melissa's eyes. "I didn't even look, because I'd already decided he was wrong. I'd already made up my mind." "Why?" "Because," Melissa's voice broke, "because Ms. Ashford looked like the kind of person who belongs in first class, and he didn't, and that was enough for me to ignore everything else." She put her head in her hands. "I've thought about it every day since," she whispered. "Every single day. What if he hadn't been the CEO? What if he'd just been a regular passenger? I would have humiliated him, maybe gotten him kicked off the plane, ruined his trip. And I would have gone home that night thinking I'd done my job." Dr. Marshall leaned forward. "Melissa, I want you to understand something. What you experienced is called implicit bias. It's not the same as being a card-carrying racist. It's the result of social conditioning, media representation, and systemic patterns that teach us to associate certain characteristics with certain groups." Melissa looked up, her eyes red. "Does that make it okay?" "No," Dr. Marshall said firmly. "It doesn't, but it explains it. And understanding is the first step toward change." Thomas Hargrove shifted in his seat. "Mrs. Simmons, we've completed our investigation. Based on the findings, we're prepared to offer you a path forward." Melissa braced herself. "You're being suspended for 6 months, without pay," Thomas said. "During that time, you'll be required to complete a comprehensive anti-bias training program, participate in community service with organizations focused on racial justice, and work with a mentor who will help you understand the impact of your actions." Melissa blinked. "You're not firing me?" "Not yet," Thomas said. "But your reinstatement is conditional. You'll be evaluated at the end of the 6 months. If you demonstrate genuine growth and understanding, you'll be offered a different position within the company, not as a flight attendant, but in a role where you can help train others to avoid the mistakes you made." "I don't understand," Melissa said. "Why would you give me a second chance?" Dr. Marshall answered. "Because Mr. Bennett believes that people can change. Not everyone, not always. But he believes in creating pathways for accountability that include redemption. Punishment alone doesn't fix the problem. Growth does." Melissa's tears fell, freely now. "I don't deserve this." "Maybe not," Dr. Marshall said. "But that's not the point. The point is what you do with it." Melissa nodded slowly. "I'll do whatever it takes, I swear. I'll spend every day trying to make this right." "Good," Dr. Marshall said, "because the world is watching, and so are we." Across town, Catherine Ashford sat in her living room. The curtains were drawn, the lights were off. Her phone lay on the coffee table, screen down. She hadn't touched it in 2 days. She'd been fired from Harmon and Spire the day after the video went viral. Not because they were progressive, not because they cared about justice, but because keeping her was bad for business. The email from HR had been brief, professional, cold. "After careful consideration, we have decided to terminate your employment effective immediately. This decision is in the best interest of the company and reflects our commitment to fostering an inclusive workplace. She'd lost more than her job. Her LinkedIn profile had been deactivated after the harassment became unbearable. Her Instagram was flooded with messages calling her a racist, a bigot, a monster. Her address had been leaked online. Strangers had shown up at her door. She'd moved in with her sister in the suburbs, changed her number, deleted her social media accounts. But she couldn't delete the video, couldn't delete the comments, couldn't delete the fact that millions of people knew her name, her face, her voice. "Catherine?" Her sister Emma knocked softly on the door. "You should eat something." "I'm not hungry." Emma opened the door anyway, sat down on the edge of the couch. "You can't hide in here forever." "Can't I?" Emma sighed. "Look, what you did was terrible. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But you're not irredeemable. You made a mistake." "A mistake?" Catherine laughed bitterly. "I humiliated a man in front of dozens of people. I told him he didn't belong somewhere because of the color of his skin. That's not a mistake, Emma. That's who I am." "That's who you were," Emma corrected. "It doesn't have to be who you are now." Catherine looked at her sister. "How do I fix this? How do I come back from this?" Emma thought for a moment. "You start by owning it. Really owning it. Not with a public apology written by a PR team. Not with excuses or justifications. You acknowledge what you did, why it was wrong, and you commit to doing better. And then what?" "And then you do the work," Emma said. "You educate yourself. You listen to people whose experiences you've never had to think about. You volunteer. You serve. You become someone who adds value to the world instead of taking from it." Catherine was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "There's a community center in D.C. They focus on racial justice and restorative practices. I saw an article about them, and I've been thinking about reaching out, seeing if they'd let me volunteer." Emma smiled softly. "That's a start." "They'll probably say no." "Maybe," Emma said, "but you'll never know if you don't try." Catherine nodded slowly. For the first time in 3 weeks there was something other than despair in her eyes. Hope. Faint. Fragile. But there. Robert Torres stood in the break room at Denver International Airport pouring himself a cup of coffee. He was back at work. Not as lead flight attendant, not with the same privileges, but back. His suspension had lasted 2 weeks. His demotion was permanent. He'd taken a 20% pay cut, lost his seniority benefits, been reassigned to shorter, less desirable routes. But he still had a job. And that was more than many people expected. A younger flight attendant, Darnell, mid-20s, black, new to the company, walked in. He hesitated when he saw Robert. "Hey," Robert said. "Coffee?" Darnell nodded cautiously. "Yeah, thanks." They stood in awkward silence while the coffee brewed. Finally, Robert spoke. "Look, I know things have been weird since the incident. And I know people are wondering if I've learned anything from it." Darnell didn't respond. "I have," Robert continued. "I've spent the last 3 weeks thinking about all the times I saw something wrong and didn't speak up. All the times I assumed certain passengers were problems without giving them a fair chance. All the times I sided with people who looked like me over people who didn't." He poured the coffee, handed Darnell a cup. "I can't undo what I did," Robert said, "but I can do better moving forward. And I hope, if you're willing, you'll call me out when I fall short." Darnell looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but I'm holding you to that." "Good," Robert said. "I need it." They drank their coffee in silence. Not friends, not yet, but something close to understanding. Jordan sat in her room, editing footage for her YouTube channel. Her follower count had exploded, 340,000 on TikTok. 180,000 on Instagram, 95,000 on YouTube. She'd been interviewed by Justice Stories, by local news, by national outlets. She'd been praised as a hero, criticized as an opportunist, analyzed by media experts dissecting her every word. It was overwhelming. Her mom knocked on the door. "Honey, you've been up here for hours. Come have dinner." "In a minute," Jordan said, eyes glued to the screen. Her mom came in anyway, sat on the bed. "You know you don't have to keep doing this, right? The video was out there. You told your story. You can step back if it's too much." Jordan paused the video, looked at her mom. "I know," she said. "But I keep thinking, what if I hadn't recorded it? What if I'd just sat there like everyone else and done nothing? That man would have been humiliated and no one would have known. Nothing would have changed." "Maybe," her mom said, "or maybe something else would have happened. You can't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, Jordan." "I'm not trying to," Jordan said. I saw something wrong and I did something about it. And now people are listening. How do I just walk away from that?" Her mom didn't have an answer. "Before we go deeper, I'd love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in this story and share your thoughts in the comments." Jordan turned back to her computer. "I got an email from a college professor. She wants to use my video in her sociology class to teach students about bystander intervention and the power of documentation." "That's amazing." "Yeah." Jordan smiled. "It is." She thought about Marcus Bennett, about the way he'd stood in that cabin and told the truth, about the way he'd used his power not to destroy people, but to create change. "I want to do that," Jordan said quietly. "I want to use this platform for something that matters, not just for likes or followers, but to actually make a difference." Her mom squeezed her shoulder. "Then do it. But remember to take care of yourself, too. You can't pour from an empty cup." Jordan nodded. "I will, I promise." Later that night, she posted a new video. Not about the incident, not about the views or the attention, about what happens next. "Hey everyone," she said into the camera. "I know a lot of you followed me because of what happened on Flight 447, and I'm grateful for that. But I want this channel to be about more than one moment. I want it to be about awareness, about justice, about the everyday moments where we all have the power to choose what's right over what's easy." She paused. "So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep telling stories. Stories about people who stood up when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Stories about change, accountability, and hope. Because that's what the world needs more of. Not just outrage, not just viral moments, but sustained action." The video went live. Within an hour, it had 50,000 views. The comments poured in. "This is exactly what we need. You're an inspiration. Keep doing what you're doing." Jordan read them all, and for the first time since the video went viral, she felt like she was on the right path. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. 6 months later. Marcus Bennett walked through the halls of SkyPath's headquarters, but the building felt different now. Lighter, more open. Walls that had once displayed corporate slogans about excellence and customer service now featured photos of real employees, real passengers, real moments of connection. He stopped in front of one photo, a flight attendant helping an elderly Muslim woman with her luggage. The image had been submitted by a passenger who'd witnessed the interaction and wanted to celebrate it. Below the photo, a caption read, "Dignity in Action." That was the new company motto. Not soaring to excellence. Not your journey, our priority. Dignity in action. Marcus had fought for it. The marketing team had hated it. Too political, they'd said. Too heavy-handed. But Marcus didn't care. because it was true, and truth mattered more than palatability. He continued down the hall toward the training center. Today was the first graduation ceremony for the new bias prevention program. 43 employees who'd completed 6 months of intensive training, community service, and personal development. Melissa Simmons was among them. As he entered the auditorium, he saw her sitting in the third row. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, her face less drawn. But more than that, there was something in her posture, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Dr. Renee Marshall was at the podium, speaking to the assembled group. Over the past 6 months, Dr. Marshall said, you've done something incredibly difficult. You've confronted your own biases. You've sat with discomfort. You've listened to stories that challenged everything you thought you knew about fairness and justice. And you've chosen to grow. She paused, looking around the room. But graduation isn't the end. It's the beginning. Because the real test isn't what you've learned in this room. It's what you do when you're back out there, in real situations, making split-second decisions that affect real people's lives. Melissa wiped her eyes. She'd spent the last 6 months volunteering at a community center in Denver, working with families affected by racial profiling. She'd heard stories that broke her heart, stories that opened her eyes, stories that made her realize how much she hadn't understood. Today, Dr. Marshall continued, we're not just certifying that you completed a program. We're certifying that you're ready to be part of the solution, that you're equipped to recognize bias in yourselves and in others, that you're brave enough to speak up when something's wrong, and that you understand that this work never ends. She called names one by one. Each graduate stood, walked to the front, and received a certificate. When Melissa's name was called, the room was quiet. She walked to the podium, her legs shaking. Dr. Marshall handed her the certificate and shook her hand. I'm proud of you, Dr. Marshall said quietly. You did the work. Melissa nodded, unable to speak. As she walked back to her seat, she passed Marcus. Their eyes met. He nodded once. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly, but it was acknowledgement, recognition that she'd taken responsibility and done the hard work of changing. That mattered. After the ceremony, Marcus spoke to the graduates. 6 months ago, he said, SkyPath Airlines became the center of a national conversation about race, bias, and accountability. That conversation was painful. For our employees, for our passengers, for me, he paused. But it was necessary, because we can't fix what we refuse to see. And for too long, this company, like so many others, refused to see the ways our policies, our culture, and our assumptions were harming people. He looked around the room. You are the first group to complete this new program. That makes you pioneers. It also makes you targets. There will be people, customers, colleagues, maybe even friends, who will tell you this is too much, that we're being too sensitive, that we're overreacting. He let that sit. When that happens, I want you to remember something. Change is always uncomfortable for people who've never had to think about the status quo. But discomfort is not the same as harm. And protecting people's comfort at the expense of their dignity is not a value we hold at SkyPath. Several graduates nodded. A few wiped their eyes. You've been given tools, Marcus continued. Knowledge, perspective, support systems. Now you have to use them, because what happens on our flights, in our airports, in every interaction we have with the public, that's on us, all of us. And we don't get to opt out just because it's hard. He smiled slightly. Welcome back. Let's get to work. The room erupted in applause. Later that evening, Marcus sat in his office, reviewing the latest data reports. Body cameras had been installed on all flight crew 6 weeks ago. So far, they'd logged over 12,000 flight hours of footage. Most of it was routine, mundane. Exactly what you'd expect. But there had been 17 incidents flagged for review. Situations where passengers had been treated differently based on race, religion, or perceived nationality. 17 incidents that would have gone unreported without the cameras. 17 opportunities for accountability. Marcus clicked through the files. One showed a flight attendant asking a South Asian man if he spoke English, despite the fact that he'd been speaking perfect English moments earlier. Another showed a white passenger being allowed to break carry-on rules while a black passenger in the same row was strictly enforced against. Small things, easy to dismiss as coincidence. But patterns don't lie. Each flagged incident triggered an automatic review. Employees were called in. Conversations were had. Some received additional training. Some were reassigned. A few were terminated. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from his wife. Jay wants to know if you're coming to his game tomorrow. Marcus smiled. Wouldn't miss it. He's been practicing his free throws. Says he's going to be better than Steph Curry. Of course he does. Love you. Don't work too late. Love you too. Marcus set the phone down and looked at the photo on his desk. His son grinning in his basketball uniform, holding a trophy from last season. 7 years old now, growing so fast. Marcus thought about the world his son would inherit, the battles that would still need fighting, the progress that would need protecting. But he also thought about the changes that had already happened, the conversations that were being had, the systems that were being rebuilt. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was something. And something was better than nothing. 2,000 miles away, Catherine Ashford stood in front of a room full of teenagers. She was at the Johnson Community Center in Washington, D.C., leading a workshop on restorative justice. It had taken her 4 months to work up the courage to volunteer, another 2 months before they'd let her near the kids. But she was here now, and she was doing the work. Okay, she said, her voice steady. Today we're going to talk about accountability, not punishment, accountability. A girl in the back raised her hand. What's the difference? Good question, Catherine said. Punishment says you did something wrong, so now you suffer. Accountability says you did something wrong, so now you make it right. Another student spoke up. But what if you can't make it right? What if the damage is done? Catherine paused. She thought about Flight 447, about Marcus Bennett, about the video that would follow her for the rest of her life. Then you live with it, she said quietly. You acknowledge the harm you caused. You commit to doing better. And you spend the rest of your life trying to be someone who adds value to the world instead of taking from it. The room was quiet. I know about this, Catherine continued, because I made a terrible mistake, a very public one. I hurt someone badly, and I can't undo it, but I can choose what I do next. She told them the story, not all of it, but enough. When she finished, the students were silent. Then the girl who'd asked the first question spoke. Do you think he forgave you? I don't know, Catherine said honestly. And I don't know if he ever will. But that's not the point. The point is that I have to forgive myself enough to keep trying to do better. Not because I deserve forgiveness, but because giving up doesn't help anyone. The session ended an hour later as the students filed out. The center's director, a black woman named Angela, approached. You're getting better at this, Angela said. Thank you, Catherine said. It's harder than I thought it would be. Good, Angela said. If it were easy, you wouldn't be learning anything. Catherine nodded. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you let me volunteer here? After everything I did? Angela looked at her for a long moment. Because I believe people can change. Not everyone, not always, but enough people, enough of the time, to make it worth trying. What if I mess up again? You will, Angela said matter-of-factly. We all do. The question is what you do after. Do you hide? Do you make excuses? Or do you own it and keep moving forward? Catherine thought about that as she drove home that night, about the person she'd been 6 months ago, about the person she was becoming. She wasn't proud of her past, but she was no longer defined by it, and that, she was learning, was its own kind of freedom. Marcus returned, home late. His son was already asleep, but his wife, Simone, was waiting up. "How'd it go?" she asked, curling up beside him on the couch. "Good," Marcus said. "First group graduated from the program today." "Including the flight attendant?" "Yeah, Melissa. How do you feel about that?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I think she's genuinely trying. I think she understands what she did and why it was wrong. That's more than a lot of people do." Simone nodded. "You did a good thing, Marcus, giving people a path forward instead of just punishing them." "I didn't do it to be nice," Marcus said. "I did it because punishment alone doesn't change culture. It just makes people scared. And scared people don't grow. They just hide." "Still," Simone said, "it took courage. A lot of people wanted you to fire everyone involved and move on." "I know," Marcus said, "but that wouldn't have solved the problem. It would have just made me feel better. And feeling better isn't the same as being better." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. "Jay wants you at his game tomorrow," Simone said. "I know. I'll be there." "Good. Because he's been telling everyone at school that his dad owns an airline and he's going to get free flights for life." Marcus laughed. "He's not wrong. He's also been asking questions about the video, about why people were mean to you." Marcus's smile faded. "What did you tell him?" "The truth," Simone said. "That sometimes people judge others based on how they look instead of who they are, and that it's not fair, but that you're working to change it." "What did he say?" "He said he wants to work at your airline when he grows up, so he can make sure everyone is treated nicely." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "He's a good kid." "He is," Simone agreed, "because he's learning from a good man." Marcus pulled her close. "I hope so." They sat together in the quiet of their home, the world outside continuing to turn, carrying its burdens and its hopes in equal measure. And Marcus Bennett, CEO of Skypath Airlines, father, husband, and reluctant symbol of a movement he'd never asked to lead, closed his eyes and let himself rest. Because tomorrow the work would continue, and the day after that, and the day after that, for as long as it took. 1 year later, Flight 447, Denver to Washington, D.C. Marcus Bennett stood in the terminal, boarding pass in hand. Same route, same airline, same seat, 1A. But everything else had changed. He walked down the jetway, the familiar sounds of rolling luggage and muffled conversations surrounding him. When he stepped onto the plane, a flight attendant greeted him with a warm smile. "Good afternoon, Mr. Bennett. Welcome aboard." Her name tag read Carmen, early 40s, Latina, one of the graduates from the third cohort of the Bias Prevention Program. "Thank you, Carmen," Marcus said. "Can I help you with your bag?" "I've got it, thank you." He moved down the aisle toward first class. A few passengers glanced up, some recognizing him, others oblivious. He didn't mind either way. As he reached seat 1A, he paused. A young black woman was already seated in 1B. Mid-20s, natural hair pulled back in a colorful head wrap. She was reading a book on organizational psychology. She looked up as Marcus sat down. "Mr. Bennett," she said with a small smile, "I was hoping I'd see you on this flight." Marcus looked at her, curious. "Have we met?" "Not formally," she said. "But I'm starting my MBA at Georgetown next week, concentrating in corporate social responsibility." Your story. What happened last year? It's one of the case studies we'll be analyzing. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Really? Yeah, she said. They're using it to teach about crisis management, organizational change, and ethical leadership. It's pretty fascinating. I'm not sure fascinating is the word I'd use, Marcus said with a slight smile. Maybe not for you, she said, but for the rest of us? It showed that change is possible, that accountability matters, that one person, even when they're being treated unfairly, can shift an entire system just by standing firm and telling the truth. Marcus was quiet for a moment. What's your name? Amara, she said. Amara Johnson. Well, Amara Johnson, Marcus said, I hope your program teaches you one more thing. What's that? That change doesn't happen because of one person. It happens because of thousands of small decisions made by thousands of people who choose to do the right thing even when no one's watching. Amara nodded thoughtfully. I'll remember that. The plane began to fill. Passengers settled into their seats. Overhead bins clicked shut. The cabin crew moved through their pre-flight checks. Carmen walked down the aisle, greeting passengers, offering assistance. When she reached Marcus, she paused. Mr. Bennett, I just want to say, working for SkyPath now feels different than it did a year ago. We're trained differently. We're held accountable differently. And that matters. So, thank you. Marcus met her eyes. Thank you for being willing to change. She nodded and continued down the aisle. The captain's voice came over the intercom. A woman's voice this time. Captain Nicole Harper. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Harper speaking. We'll be departing for Washington, D.C. shortly. Flight time today is approximately 4 hours. Weather looks good, so we're expecting a smooth ride. Marcus settled into his seat and looked out the window. The terminal buzzed with activity. Luggage carts zipped past. Ground crew members directed planes with precision. Travelers rushed toward their gates, legs in motion. He thought about everything that had happened in the past year. The board had approved his proposals, all of them. The $40 million investment in equity programs, the mandatory bias training, the body cameras, the independent review boards. Some employees had quit. Customers had complained. Shareholders had grumbled about the expense. But the data told a different story. Customer satisfaction scores were up 18%. Employee retention had improved. Discrimination complaints had dropped by 43%. And SkyPath's reputation, once tarnished by the viral video, had been rebuilt around a new narrative: accountability, growth, and genuine commitment to change. Other airlines had started following suit. United announced a similar program. Delta expanded their existing initiatives. American overhauled their training protocols. What had started as one moment on one flight had sparked a movement. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. One caught his eye. It was from Jordan, the teenager who'd recorded the original video. Hey, Mr. Bennett. Just wanted to let you know I got accepted to Howard University's journalism program. I'm going to keep telling stories that matter. Thank you for showing me what courage looks like. Marcus smiled and typed back. Congratulations, Jordan. The world needs more journalists like you. Keep shining. He put his phone away as the plane pushed back from the gate. Beside him, Amara was still reading her book. Marcus glanced at the cover. The Fifth Discipline, The Art and Practice of the Learning Organization, by Peter Senge. Good book, Marcus said. Amara looked up. You've read it? Required reading in business school. Changed how I think about leadership. What's the biggest lesson you took from it? Marcus thought for a moment. That organizations don't change because of grand speeches or new policies. They change when people at every level commit to learning, growing, and holding each other accountable. When the culture itself becomes the teacher. Amara nodded. That's exactly what you did at Skypath, isn't it? I tried, Marcus said. Still trying. The plane lifted off. Engines roaring, gravity pressing them back into their seats. Denver fell away beneath them, the grid of streets, the sprawl of suburbs, the mountains rising in the distance. Marcus closed his eyes and let himself breathe. Really breathe. For the first time in months, he felt something close to peace. Not because the work was done. It wasn't. It would never be done. But because he'd done what he set out to do. He'd taken a painful moment and transformed it into purpose. He'd used his platform not for revenge, but for reform. He'd shown that accountability and compassion weren't opposites. They were partners. And he'd proven that one person standing in their truth could move mountains. Somewhere over Kansas, the plane hit turbulence. Not serious. Just a few bumps that rattled the cabin and made passengers grip their armrests. Carmen's voice came over the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a bit of rough air. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Marcus looked around. A few nervous faces. A child whimpering. A man white-knuckling his seat. He thought about fear. About how it shapes us. How it makes us small. How it makes us cling to what's familiar even when familiar means unjust. But he also thought about courage. About the people who'd chosen growth over comfort. Melissa, Robert, even Catherine in her own way. They'd been afraid too. Afraid of judgment. Afraid of consequences. Afraid of facing the truth about themselves. But they'd done it anyway, and that mattered. The turbulence passed. The plane smoothed out. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Carmen resumed beverage service. Marcus ordered a coffee. Amara ordered tea. They sat in comfortable silence, two strangers sharing a moment in time, each on their own journey but briefly traveling the same path. "Can I ask you something?" Amara said after a while. "Sure." "Do you ever regret it? The way everything played out?" Marcus considered the question. "I regret that it had to happen, that someone had to be humiliated for the system to pay attention. But I don't regret using that moment to create change. Because if I hadn't, nothing would have been different. And the next person who looked like me would have faced the same treatment. And the one after that. And the one after that. So it was worth it?" "It had to be," Marcus said, "because the alternative was letting it go. And letting it go would have meant accepting that this is just how things are. That some people deserve dignity and others don't. That power exists to protect itself instead of serve others." He looked at her. "I couldn't accept that. I still can't." Amara nodded slowly. "I hope I have that kind of courage when I'm in a position to make those choices." "You will," Marcus said. "Because courage isn't something you have. It's something you practice every day, in small ways and big ones, until it becomes who you are." The plane began its descent into Washington. The city appeared below, monuments glowing white against the landscape, the Capitol dome gleaming, the Potomac River winding through it all like a thread holding everything together. Marcus thought about his son, about the world he was building for him, a world where a 7-year-old boy could grow up knowing that his presence wasn't a problem to be solved, that his dignity wasn't conditional, that his worth wasn't up for debate. It wasn't a perfect world, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was better, measurably, tangibly better. And that was enough to keep going. The plane landed smoothly. Passengers gathered their belongings. Marcus waited until most of the cabin had cleared before standing. Carmen was near the exit saying goodbye to passengers. When Marcus reached her, she smiled. "Safe travels, Mr. Bennett." "You too, Carmen. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for believing we could do better." He stepped off the plane and walked through the jetway into the terminal. The airport was crowded, families reuniting, business travelers rushing to their next connection, life happening in all its messy, beautiful complexity. Marcus pulled out his phone and called his wife. "Hey," she answered. "You land?" "Just did. Heading to the car now." "How was the flight?" "Good," Marcus said. "Really good." "Yeah?" "Yeah." There was a pause. Then Simone said, "Jay wants to know if you'll take him to the Air and Space Museum tomorrow." Marcus smiled. "Tell him I'll be there." "He's going to want to talk about planes the whole time." "I know." "And he's going to ask you 1,000,000 questions." "I know." "And he's going to tell everyone there that his dad is the boss of an airline." "I know," Marcus said, laughing now, "and I wouldn't have it any other way." He hung up and kept walking, past the baggage claim, past the car rental counters, past the TSA checkpoints where travelers stood in long lines, shoes off, laptops out, patients wearing thin. He thought about all the people moving through this space, all the stories they carried, all the invisible battles they fought, all the assumptions they faced just trying to get from one place to another. And he thought about the work still left to do, the flights still to be flown, the conversations still to be had, the systems still to be changed. No, it was a lot. Too much for one person. But he wasn't one person anymore. He was part of something bigger, a movement, a shift, a slow, steady tide of people choosing accountability over comfort, justice over convenience, truth over ease, and that tide was rising. Marcus stepped out into the evening air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The city hummed with life. He took a deep breath, and he kept walking, because the work wasn't finished. It was just beginning. If you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being willing to sit with the discomfort of stories like this one. What happened on Flight 447 wasn't just about one man in one seat on one plane. It was about all of us, about the assumptions we make, the biases we carry, the moments we choose to speak up or stay silent. Marcus Bennett's story shows us that power isn't about titles or positions. It's about what you do when you have the choice to stay quiet or speak truth, to seek revenge or create change, to make someone pay or help them grow. If this story moved you, if it challenged you, if it made you think about the world differently, share it. Talk about it with your friends, your family, your coworkers, because stories like this only matter if we let them change us. Hit that like button. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts. I genuinely read every single one. Subscribe to Justice Stories because we're committed to bringing you more narratives that challenge, inspire, and push us all toward a more just world. And remember, you don't have to be a CEO to make a difference. You just have to be willing to see what's wrong and do something about it, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's small, even if no one's watching. Because change doesn't happen in boardrooms. It happens in moments, in choices, in the everyday decisions we make about who we want to be and what kind of world we want to leave behind. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being part of the solution. This is Justice Stories, and this is your story too.